Okay, we are recording, so we can go to the next slide. Oopsie. Okay, thanks. So let me go back one. We already talked about this part. Okay, so this is suburban Cook County as we know it. And I want to just make sure that everyone understands the enormity of suburban Cook County. So we are a state certified local public health department. We serve 4 regions: north, west, southwest, and south. There are areas in Cook County that have their own state certified health departments, and that is Stickney, Skokie, Evanston, Oak Park, and Chicago. So those regions are not in the Cook County Department of Public Health's jurisdiction. You can also see some statistics here on how many school districts we have: over 140, 19 hospitals, a number of child care centers, and FQHCs. So the total population that we serve is over 2.5 million. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. We are going to get into the specifics of the restorative practices in schools and power building. In order to do that, I wanted to just set the stage on the why. And the why is our community health improvement planning that we've done in connection with the community. This has definitely been a collaborative effort on setting priorities for our community plans. And you can see these 3 priority areas that we have for our community health improvement plan, which is 5 years up until 2030. That is chronic disease, maternal and child health, and then also mental health and substance use. We call our community health improvement plan Building Healthier Communities 2030. And the community that we developed this with were inclusive of residents, community organizations, and partners. And we collaboratively came up with these 3 priority areas based off of research, based off of numerous partner meetings, et cetera. Now, these priorities aim to outline our strategies so that we can advance health equity, improve behavioral health outcomes, and address the social and structural factors that influence community well-being. So the restorative practices and power building open calls support this, investing in community-led approaches that strengthen the healing, connection, and long-term sustainable change to improve behavioral health outcomes. So we mentioned health equity. We focus on advancing health equity by investing in communities disproportionately impacted by health and social inequities. We talked about those structural or upstream drivers. We're addressing that through community-led healing, engagement, and systems change. And then we also are focused on strengthening community resilience and well-being by promoting restorative practices, social connection, and collective action. So now I'm going to pass it on to our Director of Community Behavioral Health Unit. She's going to give more in-depth information on the grant opportunities or open calls. So I'll pass it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Frankie. So we're going to be talking about 2 open calls this afternoon. We'll provide an overview and some details about both open calls, and then answer questions at the end from potential applicants. So the first open call we're talking about today supports schools and school districts in implementing restorative practices. And the second open call supports organizations that conduct community organizing or base building to address structural drivers of behavioral health. Our first opportunity, restorative practices in schools, supports schools and school districts in the organizational change work that's necessary to implement restorative practices. So this could look like supporting technical assistance through staff time or with consultants to change policies and practices related to suspension, expulsions, and alternative school placements. It could also include professional development for educators and school staff, or assessment of schools and school districts in their readiness to implement restorative. The second, this work, the Restorative Practices Open Call, advances recommendations from the Health Department's recent report on restorative practices in suburban Cook County schools. The Health Department held conversations with diverse partners and analyzed data from the Illinois State Board of Education for this restorative practices report. And we found that suburban Cook County schools were overrepresented in the state for racial inequities in school discipline, and that restorative practices is an evidence-based alternative to exclusionary discipline. Our second opportunity that we'll be talking about today is the Power Building Open Call. So this open call is for community-based power building organizations. These are organizations that conduct community organizing or base building activities to support, address structural drivers of behavioral health. So base building is the process of developing strong, engaged community, a strong and engaged community of individuals who are connected through shared experiences, relationships, and a commitment to creating positive change. So some of the structural drivers that applicants for this opportunity could potentially address include social isolation, civic engagement, community alcohol policies, or criminal legal system reform. But this is not an exclusive list. These are some potential topics to address. So these are all drivers of behavioral health outcomes and behavioral health inequities. And finally, as Frankie mentioned, there is a third opportunity that we just released yesterday. We're not going to be talking about that opportunity this afternoon, but we did just want to highlight that and that this opportunity was just released. The virtual information session for this opportunity is going to be held next week. And more information about this opportunity is also available on the Grant Opportunities webpage on the Public Health Department's website. I'm going to pass the mic to Camille Johnson, who is our Grants Administration Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Good afternoon, everybody. At this time, I'll be going over eligibility requirements and award information for restorative practices in schools. Eligible applicants for this funding opportunity belong to the groups of publicly funded schools and school districts, intermediate service centers, nonprofits, and restorative practices consultants serving suburban Cook County schools or districts. So organizations and entities can submit a joint application, but must designate one organization as a fiscal agent. Schools also have to serve areas that are served by state certified public health departments, including Evanston, Oak Park, Skokie, Stickney, and these departments are not eligible, just those serving suburban Cook County. Applicants should also demonstrate experiences implementing restorative practices and show capacity to provide training and technical assistance. For the award information, there's $55,000 in total award available. There will be 2 total awards. Funding amounts will be determined based on proposal quality and scope. The project period for this grant will be September 1st, 2026 through November 30th, 2026. And we do reserve the right to adjust the award amount based on the proposal quality, demonstrated need, and program capacity. Just some additional notes in terms of funding. So funding will be provided through a combination of different ways. So we will be able to provide reimbursement as well as advancements in accordance with Cook County policies and procedures. And it'll also be based on organizational need and fiscal performance assessments. We will be scoring based on the top applicants. So the amount requested from each of the 2 award organizations will be based on scoring. The 2 awards will be less than $55K. And then also we acknowledge that the 3 months of the performance period is not a very long project period. So we'll be looking at the strongest applicants. In terms of eligible activities for restorative practices, these funds could be used for assessment and readiness. They can also be used to facilitate trainings, restorative justice implementation at schools, coaching, technical assistance, school climate improvement strategies, and then also evaluation and continuous efforts. Allowable costs for this grant includes personnel and fringe benefits, consultant and facilitator fees, trainings, curriculum costs. Also, supplies and materials for this grants are also allowed. If venue rental is required for the program scope of work, it can also be charged to direct costs, including printing, outreach materials, food, and other types of supplies. Participant incentives and stipends are allowed with certain conditions, and then transportation related to the program implementation also. Indirect costs can also be included up to the approved de minimis rate, up to first 25,000 of subawards or contracts. Unallowable costs for this grant include capital improvements and other construction expenses. All costs for this program must be reasonable, necessary, allocable, and allowable under uniform guidance. Also, the funding must align with the approved scope of work. So every activity that you do charge for this grant should directly support restorative practices and also outline with your grant agreement. The cost must be aligned directly with your program activities. And we do reserve the right to ask for additional documentation when you submit for these requests. If staff or resources support multiple programs, we do ask that you only allocate the portion for this approved grant program when submitting those requests to us. For eligibility requirements for power building, we're looking for organizations that do conduct community organizing and base building. Additional requirements are that you must be a 501c3 organization, you must serve suburban Cook County communities, and then you must be located within suburban Cook County. Award information for power building is as follows. There's a total of 40,000 in award funds available. There will be 2 awards, with the maximum award being 40K. Also, the project period for this grant will be September 1st through November 30th, 2026. So as we stated before, we do recognize that this is a 3-month period. So we will be scoring based on the strongest applications. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Isaac Marufo. He's a community engagement manager with the Community Behavioral Health Unit, and we'll be discussing power building eligibility and eligible activities.
Thank you, Camille. When discussing the eligible costs, it's important to remember that grant funding is supporting activities such as staff time for community engagement, policy analysis, development, training, and community education. However, these funds cannot be used for direct legislative advocacy. In general, all costs charged to this grant should be reasonable, necessary, allocable, and allowable under the 2 CFR Part 200, also known as uniform guidance. In other words, these expenses should be essential to carrying out the work of the grant, permitted under federal regulations, and the terms of the award, and appropriate to the assign of the grant. All expenses must also be well documented. This includes maintaining invoices for purchases, proof of payment such as receipts, staff timesheets, or allocation logs that support costs and distributed. One important concept to keep in mind is the proportional cost sharing. For example, if an employee whose salary is charged for the grant only spends 50% of their time working on this grant related to activities, then only 50% of their salary should be charged to the grant. Similarly, a cost cannot be charged as a direct expense if it's already being recovered through the organization's indirect funds. So the maximum indirect cost that can be charged without negotiation agreement is 15% of total monthly expenditures. And then finally, do want to note that CCDPH does reserve the right to request additional budget justification or support documentation. They'll make final determination of the allowability of the cost. And then on to the next slide, just want to cover reporting requirements and key performances and expectations for funded partners. Funded organizations will be required to submit both programmatic and fiscal reports on either a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the assigned organizational risk level. These risk levels are determined through an annual organizational risk assessment. In addition to reporting, funded partners are expected to track expenditures and program outcomes in accordance to the Cook County guidelines. Partners will be participating in program monitoring, required check-in meetings, and evaluation activities, but the frequency of these activities is also determined by their risk level. Funded organizations will maintain complete and accurate records of all grant-related documentation is subject to review and audit by Cook County. Lastly, it's important to emphasize the compliance of reporting and performance requirements and their conditional funding. Any failure to meet requirements may result in corrective action, and if issues are not resolved, could ultimately lead to termination of grant funding. And with that being said, I'll pass it over to our monitoring and evaluation coordinator, Monica Chen, to provide a smart sheet overview.
Thank you, Isaac. So now we're just going to go over what the process will be for submitting your application for these grant opportunities. Both applications are housed in Smartsheet, and I dropped the link in the chat to both forms there. I do want to note with Smartsheet, you're not able to save as you go along, unfortunately, but luckily we've designed the applications so that you can prepare most of the materials before you actually start filling out the sheet. So we ask that you just make sure that you are filling out all required fields on the form and uploading all of the required documentation before submitting. We've provided a couple of templates in each Smartsheet form. And you can see in the screenshot here, we have a couple of links, and those templates will support you writing your program proposal as well as your program budget. The program proposal template is in a Word document form, and the program budget template is in an Excel form. And please note there are a couple of tabs in that Excel form, so make sure that you're completing all of the necessary information there. In addition, just make sure that you're including all of the required documents and make sure that they're finalized before uploading them onto Smartsheet. And the next slide. So this is just an example of what you'll find in that form. We ask for contact information for the person submitting the application. And if the person submitting the application is not the lead of the organization submitting, we also ask that you include their information as well. This could be CEO, president, executive director, etc. In addition, it's not pictured here, but we also ask that you list any additional organizations that you are applying with for the grant opportunity, as well as who the fiscal agent will be. Next slide. And finally, we do have a checklist in the form itself, just so that you can make sure you're uploading all of the required documentation. And so that will include what's listed in the screenshot here. And again, this is for the restorative practices form. It will look a little different for the power building form. We also ask that you include clear file names so that we can identify which document is which when we're reviewing the application, and check off all of the required boxes here, as well as we have a section with a list of what is required for the funding opportunity. And so we just have this space where you can acknowledge that you've seen the requirements on here. Finally, we do strongly encourage that you check off the very last piece on this form that says, send me a copy of my responses, just so that you have a backup copy of your submission. And now I'll hand it back to our grants admin or manager, Camille.
Thank you, Monica. So I just want to expand a little bit more on the required documentation that Monica did discuss. So for power building, the required documentation that must accompany the application that you do submit is a W-9, a certificate of good standing from Illinois. A proposal template is also going to be provided for that program proposal. And then also there's a template for the program budget that is required. For restorative practices in schools, the required documentation is a W-9, a certificate of good standing from Illinois, a program proposal, again, a template is provided, program budget, template is also provided, and then a letter or letters of support. And you can learn more about the program proposal templates for those things there on the website, but letters of support from organizations that you do choose to partner with. So please complete the form in Smartsheet and then remember to upload those attachments before you hit submit. In terms of evaluation criteria, all proposals will be evaluated through a competitive process. Each eligible applicant will be evaluated on the strength of their application and the responsiveness to the selection criteria. So we'll be looking at, but not limited to, the demonstrated community need, quality and feasibility of the proposed program model, capacity of the organization to manage and oversee fiscal, administrative, and programmatic reports and aspects of the program, and equity and community voice. We will also be assessing budget clarity and cost reasonableness just to ensure that we're following uniform guidance. So just a couple of tips. We will be assessing the entire application, so please make sure you're filling it out for completeness. Every aspect of the application does contribute to your overall score. So we do ask that you answer each question thoroughly. And then again, double check to make sure that you are uploading all that required documentation before you do hit submit. We wanted to provide you all a little bit more information about how to ask questions related to these different open calls, as well as where to get more information. So to submit the application and to find more details about the information session, which is today, we are having a link in this website to the grant opportunity slide. So if you want to go to the CCDPH website, the link is provided there. Also, all questions regarding the open call should be submitted via email. We do have an email address that we have provided you all so that you can ask us questions, and we will be providing prompt responses to those questions for this application. So if you submit those questions within the timeline that's provided in the table below, we'll be able to provide you a response based on that date. We will next go over a few of the FAQ responses that we've already had for these two funding opportunities on the next slides. The application period for this grant is June 23rd through July 22nd, 2026 at 6 p.m. Again, if you have any questions, please visit our grant opportunities website. At this time, I am going to pass it back over to Hannah Kite, the director of our Community Behavioral Health Unit, and she's going to go over those FAQ responses that we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. So we've received 2 questions through our Building Healthier Communities email address. We wanted to go over those 2 questions. The responses to these questions will also be posted through that grants website or webpage on the health department's website. So the first question was connected to the open call for restorative practices in schools. This organization was wondering if restorative practices in schools, the open call could, whether early Head Start or Head Start locations would be eligible for this funding. The short answer is yes, they are eligible. We also wanted to note that the proposed services and activities need to be within suburban Cook County. And that also excludes places that have their own state certified health department, as we've mentioned previously today. That includes Oak Park, Evanston, Skokie, and Stickney Township. And you may have administrative offices outside of suburban Cook County, but the grant funded services and all activities and participants must benefit residents of suburban Cook County. So the second question we received was connected to the power building opportunity. This organization asked whether there was any eligibility requirements related to exclusive focus on individuals in a faith community, to work on a college campus or a place of worship, or to faith-based programming that combines mental health with faith values and perspectives. The applicants or any applicants focus on a specific faith community that does not impact eligibility. Faith-based organizations are eligible to apply if they meet all the eligibility requirements and in line with CCDPH's mission, vision, and values. In addition, college campuses and faith organizations are eligible spaces. Those spaces do need to be within suburban Cook County, and not in places with their own state certified health departments, again, Evanston, Oak Park, Skokie, and Stickney Township. We also just wanted to emphasize that for the Power Building Open Call, this is really to support organizations that have a clear community organizing or base building approach, and the strongest applicants would be responsive to that, the focus of that second open call. Okay, we're gonna jump to the live Q&A. So please feel free to come off mic or drop a question in the chat, and we'll start to go through the questions. Thank you. Okay, we have two questions from Glenwood Academy. The first question is a nonprofit residential school eligible for the grant? I think if for this question, if the school is publicly funded, whether it's residential or not, does that not impact their eligibility? And then the second question is, are proposed programs required to have a behavioral health advocacy organization or behavioral health treatment provider to provide mental health education to youth and young adults of color? For the restorative practices and the power building open call, you are not required to have a relationship with a behavioral health advocacy organization or a treatment provider. That is a requirement, however, of the shop call. We also have a question about whether a nonprofit needs to identify school partners prior to the program plan submission, or can partner cultivation happen post-award? There isn't a requirement. There is a requirement for a letter of support for restorative practices for entities that are applying that are not schools to have a letter of support from a school or school district. For Glenwood Academy, there's a follow-up question. If maybe you could provide some more, share a little bit more. Are you asking if you would still be required from an agency or provider to provide a letter of support? I believe the for restorative practices or for power building. The letters of support are not required for restorative practices. No, not for restorative practices. You're not required to have a letter of support from a behavioral health provider. We have a question about whether GATA certification is required. Camille, do you have thoughts on that question?
I can check in with finance and we'll post that response just to be clear to ensure we gave you the correct answer.
Thank you. We also have a question about eligibility for organizations that have locations both in the city of Chicago and suburban communities. If you have a headquarters in the city of Chicago, as well as locations in the south suburbs, then you would be eligible to apply for these opportunities. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. One more question. Is there a minimum operating budget for the applicant to apply? No, there is no minimum operating budget. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Oh, let's see, a decision date. We're hoping to announce about a month after the close of the grant. So new question about eligibility because of like location of different offices. As long as you're serving Cook County residents and with your programs and activities, then you're eligible for the power building opportunity. I believe the next question is also sort of about eligibility. I think for this one, if you're providing programs and services within suburban Cook County, Oak Lawn is part of our jurisdiction. We have a team member that really loves to end meetings. He's unfortunately not here today. Wanted to give just one final opportunity to add any questions to the chat or come off mute. Couple more seconds, a minute or so. Team, have I missed any questions in the chat? Frankie, can I ask you to close us out?
Well, we want to thank everyone for attending today. The recording will be put on the website. If you do have any further questions, I lifted up the email for you to use. And we will be posting responses periodically. So just keep an eye out for that. We look forward to reading your applications. And want to thank the team from the Community Behavioral Health Unit for all of their input and expertise in developing this. And we look forward to reading your applications. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.